Welcome to today's video demonstration here on the Beauty of Pastel. Today we are painting with lots of texture in grasses and snow. I hope you enjoy. This is a custom size piece because I cut it off of a large roll. I order it by the roll, and I am gesturing with a pencil to create a loose sketch of the basic kind of just outline of my reference photo. Now I have this paper taped off into basically, I think it's cut into about a 12 by 12, but I wanted to create more of a portrait oriented landscape for you. So it's taped off at a little bit bigger than an 8 by 10. Now I like, whenever I tape my pieces off, I like to start off with a bigger piece of paper so I can actually paint to more of like a 9 by 11 if I want to do an 8 by 10. And that way I can frame in if I like. I can add a mat, or I can trim the edges exactly how I like. Now you can see what I'm doing with this acrylic ink. So I showed you a couple weeks ago how I use the acrylic ink on an old painting surface, but this is a new painting surface. Obviously, I am using my favorite just scrap fabric. This is a really loose weave cotton that doesn't shed a lot of fiber. Now I'm going to be adding some shadow colors to this. This is a sepia, and I used an umber as well for the upright grasses. That's the yellow brownish parts that you're seeing. Now I'm going to add some shadow colors. I'm wanting to make sure that the threads are showing. That's something that I love about the fabric, is that it just kind of creates those little grassy effects for you that then you can layer the pastel over. I already have the texture because of the fabric. Okay, now while I'm waiting for the foreground area to dry, of course the lower, 3/4 of the painting, I'm gonna work on the tree branches, because there's some trees that are poking up over this hill at this park I was at. I was walking around on this snowy day trying to get some snow photographs to paint. And this hill was so pretty with the light effect on it, and there were some trees over the edge, and I shot up towards the trees, which created a kind of a unique composition. And so I'm adding those really fast while my foreground dries. Now you might be going, whoa, Bethany, why are you making the sky brown? What is that about? I wanted to create the effect of bare branches without having to draw every branch in. I'm painting the color that I want the bare branches to be, and then later I'm going to add the sky color on top, carving out those little bits of branches. This is what I've found I really like to do for my bare trees, because I find bare trees can be very difficult for me and for lots of people. It takes a lot of practice to get the effect down that you like. But this is the rubbing alcohol with my size 6 fan brush, just working that branch color in. But don't worry, I promise this won't look weird once I'm finished. Started to add the blues in. I wanted to cut in these blues on the edges and of course up there in the grasses. I'm going to really work from top to bottom of this piece, almost like I do whenever I'm working with like a sky painting like I did last week. But I'm just going to get this established so I don't have to worry about it as much, and I can focus mostly on the grasses. I'm adding in some cobalt blues, I'm adding in some turquoise blues, and also just a few little light touches of purple. I love to use analogous colors in this stage pretty messy, sloppy way, just layering on shades of colors that are very similar. And then I work on carving out a more refined areas. And you can see that the trees are starting to form. I put the blue on in that one little triangle over there on the right top where I am right now, and then over on the left as the hill sweeps up, carving out and defining those two trees. I'm not really worrying right now about any hard edges in these trees. They are not my focal point, but I do want there to be obviously look like a tree to whoever is looking at this painting. And so I am working a little bit to gesturally draw a few little branches, add some leaf color. If I've carved out leaf color that I think, oh, maybe I should have left that in. Sanded paper is so great. We can, if we haven't covered the tooth too much, add a few little light taps of those branch colors to simulate bare branches. And now begins the fun layers of this grass. I am always usually start my grassy paintings with a harder pastel because you can scumble as well as create more linear marks with the edges of that pastel, almost like the point of the pastel. I like to add scumbling first and then add very few little details with the hard pastels. I'm looking at this reference photo and seeing how the light is really touching and highlighting these lighter tippy tops of this grass. I'm looking at my pastels and trying to simulate those colors. Now I'm gently swiping this pastel, not really on the point. This is a Richardson pastel, which is a little soft for me, but it is one of the best colors that I had in my palette box for this particular section of this pastel painting. And I am starting to kind of tap to create those very tops of the seeds of those grasses, especially on areas where that lighter value would benefit against the darker value of the tree that's right up on top of it. I want to create kind of a big contrast between those two values because that's where a light and a dark value are meeting. I'm also trying to concentrate on adding desaturated and grayed, more neutral colors here in the beginning layers of the grasses because I want to put on some more heavily saturated bright cadmium yellows. But I want to kind of hold myself back because I don't want it to be too cartoony at the very beginning. I want to create more depth than that. And so I'll add those really bright yellows towards the end. Now what I'm doing is establishing just a little bit more of a dark base for these grasses. The acrylic ink base was great. It did dry a little lighter because I put a little too much water on it, I think. But often, even in other paintings, I'll still refine those edges because that's the base of the clumps of the grass. Looking at it to see if I like the composition of it, adding some darks up into the trees, and then also adding those same darks down into the grasses so we have a good color cohesion and good color temperature all the way throughout the painting. These are new pastels that I'm using. I've often said I just love the harder pastels. I really like Rembrandts and I really like new pastels, especially for the early stages of a painting because they just hardly take up any tooth at all and they're just fun, especially with grasses. Those harder pastels create such beautiful effects. Now I'm going to start putting in some warm areas of where I want the snow to be in the light. And I'm using a very soft Richardson pastel. That was an orange coral that I was using. Now I'm using more of a lavender. And I put the lavender right next to the coral because I want it to be my bridge value. I talk about bridge values a lot because it helps me explain how you need to have a value in between a light and a dark. Now I'm going to start adding some blue in, and I'm going to use pretty much the same blues that are in the sky right now. Maybe a little, this one is actually cobalt that I'm using. There might be some ultramarines up there in the sky. I like to use a lot of different similar value colors, similar value in darkness, but also a little different hues throughout my snow scenes. This creates some interest, some complexity to the piece instead of just one solid block of blue or solid block of violet. Of course, I'm not putting the blue right now on top of where I put those peachy colors, and I'll be adding in some more pure bright, close to white, but not pure white. I rarely use pure whites. Maybe every now and then in a snow scene, or if there's a glint of water in a reference, but usually I just like to use either cream, like very light cream yellows, or very light blues, almost that you almost can't even tell that they're blue. Now I'm just going to begin the dance of soft pastel. I love this stage, carving out nooks and crannies of the grass and where things are peeking out and peeking in, and where you can see the ground, and where there might be a tuft of grass but then a little shadow. And it's just such a fun part of the painting process for me. It's one of my very favorite parts of painting is this step. And this is, I believe this is a Rembrandt, and I'm just going to start adding in, I'm using the side of the pastel and scraping it up to create, and kind of wiggling it back and forth to make some more linear grasses here. I'm adding in some, this is a brighter yellow, obviously, you can tell, and that's just going to start bringing in those brighter, lighter colors. That was a new pastel that I just used, just again in that kind of maroon burgundy color, just whisking it and gently across to glaze that area of where those shadows are, to create a little bit more depth. And I'm looking really carefully at my pastel palette here, and often I'll get asked, how do you know what brand to use? How do you know what softness to use? And that comes from painting a lot and knowing what can handle how much tooth is left on your piece. The more you paint, the more you're going to be able to feel how the paper changes with the different pastel applications. You can tell how much tooth is left when you are using pastels. You touch it, you can tell, and you can know as a pastelist what pastels will layer on top of that. Usually the softer pastels will layer over pretty much everything, of course up to a certain point. The harder pastels will not. They stop laying down pigment because they're just not as powdery, and so they don't loosen and microscopically to fill that tooth. And harder pastels just don't really layer with a very strong mark over softer pastels. When you use hard pastels over a soft pastel, it's more to glaze or to just add a hint of color, or sometimes really just to blend, because they also can blend very well. Right now, what I'm thinking is, where is the light and where are the shadows? And I'm also wanting to really be conscious of my marks. I'm not trying to scumble a lot in this piece because I want to create an interesting effect in the shadows, because the photo was so interesting with all the mess that was going on. I hope you enjoyed watching that pastel come to life. It was so much fun to paint. It's always fun to teach you new techniques, and I hope you learned something. If you did, please give this video a like. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and hit that little notification bell so you can know when a new video comes available. If you'd also like to help support this content coming out, every little bit helps. I would love it if you would consider visiting my Patreon page. The link is right here. Thank you so much for considering it. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I will see you around.